Welcome to the Uplevel Dairy Podcast. This is the podcast for dairy producers and professionals who are committed to moving our industry forward. I'm Peggy Coffeen, and each week we bring you the leaders, the lessons, and real-world stories from the people who have built the dairy business we know today and those who are shaping its future. Join us on the journey by following Uplevel Dairy on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, and subscribe at upleveldairy.com to get new episodes and our Dairy Insights blogs right in your inbox. Welcome to this special collaboration between World Dairy Expo's The Dairy Show podcast and Uplevel Dairy podcast. I'm your host, Peggy Coffeen, and in this recognition award winner series, we are introducing you to the remarkable people whose leadership, vision, and commitment continue to move the global dairy industry forward. Today's guest is Cory Geiger, recipient of World Dairy Expo's 2026 Industry Person of the Year Award. Throughout his career as a journalist and editor for Hoard's Dairyman, a dairy economist with CoBank, as well as an award-winning author and devoted dairy mentor, Cory has helped dairy producers better understand their business while inspiring the next generation of dairy leaders. Today, we'll explore the experiences, values, and lessons that shaped his journey and what all of us can learn from it. Join in celebrating this year's honorees at World Dairy Expo's Awards Recognition Banquet on Tuesday, September 29th in Madison, Wisconsin. For banquet tickets and more information on World Dairy Expo, visit worlddairyexpo.com. Now, let's hear from Cory Geiger. Cory, welcome and congratulations on receiving one of the highest, most esteemed honors in the dairy industry, and that's being the 2026 World Dairy Expo Industry Person of the Year. Congratulations, Cory, and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Peggy. This is certainly a momentous occasion.
It certainly is. And Cory, as someone who has known you for most of my life and growing up in the dairy industry, I have personally seen the way that you have been a leader. But what I've seen that others may not see is the way that for a very, very long time, you've always been a servant who's given back. And what I think of in my mind there is when I was a kid growing up doing Dairy Quiz Bowl, and I knew Cory Geiger, for one, because I always had to memorize your name as the editor of Hoard's Dairyman, but you would always come back and volunteer to be a moderator in our state Dairy Quiz Bowl contest here in Wisconsin. I know you speak on global stages around the world, but in my eyes, when I see the people that give back to youth and don't forget where they came from and take their time and pour into that, that just brings this whole new level of what servant leadership truly is. And when I think of that, Cory, I think of you.
Well, thank you. As a young person, there were so many adults who took a moment to just plant a seed or encourage me. And I would not be here where I am today without that. I didn't travel much. I worked hard on our family farm. I was a big part of the labor force growing up. But today, fast forward, one of the most rewarding parts of my life is when young people come up and say, I remember you saying this and you encouraged me to do that. Just a month ago, I got the Distinguished Leadership Award at Holstein, and there was a line of 15 young people after the meeting dispersed, and I just smiled, and I'm like, well, then I'm doing good. Absolutely.
And Cory, so what was that moment like when you get the phone call from Laura Hirschleb, the general manager of World Dairy Expo, and she shares this incredible news? Take me back to that moment. What was it like, and what did that mean to you?
Well, there's a unique thing about me. There's certain voicemails I save. I still have a message of birthday cheer from my late father that I listen to once in a while to hear his voice. But I went back and listened to the original voicemail that Laura left on March 30th. And I could tell by the bounce in her voice that this was something more than just talking about World Dairy Expo. And so I listened to it, and she said, I was driving down the road to a work meeting for CoBank to Minneapolis. And I'm like, I better call that one back right away. And my breath was taken away as she told me that I had won the award.
And what did that mean to you?
I pulled over and listened to her, and the next thing I did is I went on the World Dairy Expo website and looked at the past winners. And so many of them are people. Miles McCary, a character in dairy history, once wrote a story with a headline, Immortals Who Once Knew Me. And I looked at the past winners and some of the great things they've did in the industry, and just to be considered among them really gave me pause.
What an incredible moment and a full circle one. And it goes back to something you mentioned a moment ago, Cory, and that was that you grew up as a kid working hard on the farm. And you've described yourself as that Manitowoc County farm boy growing up on that small dairy farm. But there was a pretty pivotal moment for you as a youth, and it actually happened at World Dairy Expo, didn't it? Can you take me back a little bit? Share that story of the day that your eyes opened up to the possibilities of what dairy could offer right there at World Dairy Expo.
I was a member of the Manitowoc County 4-H judging team, and we won the state contest in 1990, and that afforded us the trip to represent Wisconsin at World Dairy Expo. And I was just going to be a senior in high school, and I remember walking into the ring on the colored shavings, and it was a class of Ayrshire heifers. I spent more time looking around the ring, looking at the decorations, just taking it all in. And I remember what I said to myself. I said, I want to be part of the dairy industry the rest of my life. I didn't do so good on that Ayrshire class. I got an abysmal 28th place. I remember that the rest of the day I averaged 40. I was placed 45 or higher. So I probably cost myself an All-American finish, but it never bothered me because it was that moment that I found my passion. And that passion had started years earlier. Mom making me go to judging practice to practice reasons. Never made the junior team. My sister bounced me off on the last space. My 5-year younger sister, that's a humbling experience. Didn't make the team, of course, my first couple times as a senior member, but I also remember the day it was in the barn. I was at Ulness's barn, and I had always written my notes down about the placings, and I would read them right out of my notebook. And Bill Borgwart said, "Cory, you know cows. You can tell a good story. Can you just put the clipboard today and tell me a story about those 4 cows?" And I did. I was nervous as heck, and I've been telling stories ever since because of Bill's words that day.
Isn't it so full circle to think of how World Dairy Expo, that moment, that starstruck moment in the center of the show ring there for supposed to be judging Ayrshires, but truly it was like you could see your future flashing before your eyes. And it all ties into what has become your life's work, and that's telling stories. And telling stories comes in different ways. You've had a career as a long-standing editor of Hoard's Dairyman. Storytelling in that way, the stories you tell are different. They're based on the economics and a global perspective. Your storytelling has changed. You think about that transition that you've made, Cory. What transpired from the kid in the middle of the show ring from Manitowoc County who had hardly left the state to now the world traveling dairy economist who, as to date this year, has spoken at 25 different meetings and engagements and traveled to, I don't know, how many countries?
Well, I've been 4 continents and quite a few countries on those continents. I go back, I remember it was vividly to this day. How does a person with a dairy science econ major land up with the career he had? But in the summer of 1986, my dad took me to the local bank and opened up a checking account. I was going to be an 8th grader that year. And he said, "You need to learn about money. My dad died at age 16. You never know what life's going to deal with you. And if you can manage your money, everything else is possible." So I actually still have the same checking account. The bank has merged multiple times, but it's that checking account. And then Dad said, "The other thing I'm going to do, you really like genetics. I'm going to give you a budget. You can pick the bulls, you can mate the cows. It's your baby." And I remember buying bull semen, walking in the house with the AI representative, getting Mom to write a check. And the first couple of times they wouldn't even put it in the tank at first because they weren't sure that this was a true story. But then fast forward real quick to college, major in dairy science. Then my good friend Rob Ripshin and Derek Most were heading to the dean's office my freshman year. "Hey, what are you guys doing?" "Well, we're going to declare an ag econ major too." "Hey, I'll come along." So I had those 2 foundations that were integral. Then I had an internship the summer of 1994 at Nova, which eventually merged into Gen X, and they had me do a lot of writing that summer. I had 1 journalism course up to that point. And I remember them editing my articles, and it looked like a chicken sacrificed at life with the red ink on the paper. But I said, "Oh, I'm not a good writer." And I remember the late Hap Allen saying, "No, you're a great these stories will resonate with farmers. You just need to brush up on your grammar and such. So he told Dave Dixon, the late Dave Dixon, they shared that with Bill Knox, and I landed up getting hired 15 months before I graduate as an associate editor. Then the one other thing that happened, Dr. George Shook took Rob Ripshin and I in the office, and he said, I don't know what the two of you are going to do in agriculture, but you need to bring this full circle. I want you to take the capstone food science course where they designed milk plants and managed milk flow and product flow. And Professor Bradley in that class stood up and said, we finally got some farm kids in this class. He had Rob and I stand with all the other students. It was the capstone course for the food science course. Said, get to know these farm kids. And if they don't at least get a B, the rest of you get C's in this class. And we sat down, and I learned so much about dairy processing that semester. And if you know those four little touch points with my life journey, it makes sense to where I am today.
And Cory, you've mentioned a few people who are pretty instrumental along that path. Any others that have really shaped ultimately where you've gone and the impact you've made along the way?
I did mention Bill Borgwart, and Sunnyside Farms was iconic, especially to Manitowoc County farm boy. We had our herd veterinarian, Dr. Lyle Holschbach. He actually landed up being my confirmation sponsor, but I learned a lot from him. Great veterinarian. I remember way back in 1982, Bob Hagenau was walking through the barn, and he looked at me and looked at the calf, never met him before. He goes, tell me about that heifer. And I did. And he goes, she's really good. Can I help you get her a better clip job? And she landed up standing second to a heifer that was being exported to Japan for $10,000. I always remember that moment of kindness. Certainly my judging coach, Dave Dixon, and then the late Dave Sellner, who grew up in Northeast Wisconsin. We became really good lifelong friends. And there were many, many others, but those were some people that, and then the crew at Hoard's Dairyman over the years, Bill Knox, Gene Meyer, Ewing Rowe, and Steve Larson. I got to Hoard's. Those guys had 120 years of editorial experience, and I had one day.
Wow.
And what I learned from them about the industry and writing and everything else, you could not teach in a classroom.
What an incredible list of mentors that you've had, Cory. And when you think about that, how has that shaped the way that you've wanted to serve, lead, and give back?
When a dairy group asks me to speak or help at a youth event, I just look at my calendar and usually say yes. Even there's Dairy Bowl teams that we do 1-hour Zoom calls where I tell stories and just randomly ask Dairy Bowl questions. But if I can spark a youth to be part of this industry, that's the best honor I can have. And with less farm kids, we have to plant seeds and spark interest because we need people in our industry.
And Cory, from personal experience too, I've seen you do many of these things, and sometimes it's the big things and sometimes it's the little things. And one of the things that does plant that seed and a spark in a way that is bigger than you might even know is, I know you and Krista every year at the Wisconsin Junior Holstein Convention give out a little rope halter, or I should say a little nylon halter for any youth that is there for the first time at the State Junior Holstein Convention. And that means that every single kid that's there for the first time leaves that convention feeling like they won something, and that something is theirs that they get to take home and put to work for hopefully what becomes a passion of their own. And that's understanding dairy cattle, working with dairy cattle, and that door that opens up to such a big, wide industry. And I, again, get to see this firsthand. Again, it's very reflective too of this journey that has taken you around the world. And we've touched on what that career at Hoard's has looked like and the mentors there, but catch us up to speed. CoBank, talk about being a dairy economist and what that actually looks like for you on a daily basis and the impact that you hope to make in this part of your career, in this chapter of your life, Cory.
I'm going to answer that question in a moment. That rope halter idea, you ever watch kids at parades when they get candy thrown at them and how smiley they are running out and get it? I wanted the young people, and Krista did too, to walk away with something and put a smile on their face. CoBank, it's an incredible role. CoBank's one of the largest lenders to U.S. dairy and certainly U.S. dairy processing in rural America. So I'm 12 of us work on the knowledge exchange team. We all have our economic specialties. When I came to CoBank, I had a couple early goals on the research front. I'd say a third of my time is spent doing research, a third public speaking, and a third working with clients and the relationship managers that call on them. I wanted to put an economic value on the value of genetics. I heard for years and years in my role at Holstein and different dairy meetings, I wish my banker knew the value of genetics. If I got to CoBank and couldn't do that, then I failed. The other thing I knew back in 2023 that our industry was rapidly changing. USDA had been tracking milk production since 1924. It's been the gold standard, but the world has changed and butter, fat, and protein, and the pounds of that mattered more. And I was like, how do we quantify that? Yeah. And using a number, it took me 2 years and I did 4 different reports to really, I wanted to shift the conversation in the industry. 80% of milk goes into manufactured dairy products. That means the water, the liquid in the milk doesn't matter. So I spent a lot of time on that and then built models to predict herd replacement forecasts because we know that beef on dairy is having a dramatic impact, maybe up to 20% of revenue on dairy farms there. I just sit there with my Manitowoc County farm kid hat on and say, what do the dairy farmers in our country and around the world need to know? What do the dairy processors need to know? And how can that drive more consumer demand ultimately for dairy? And dairy's having a great moment on protein. We're making a lot of butter fat. We need to find new ways of that. I'm a problem solver. I'm a networker. I try to bring all those things together.
Cory, I'm going to add to that. I think you're a dot connector, right? You're connecting the dots between the data, the real information that's out there, and putting it into a format to communicate that to, like you said, to what does the dairy producer need to know. But your impact previously was very much directly to that producer, right? And now it seems like you've stepped back and can see this bigger view of how the dots that you're connecting, you're asking yourself, what's my part in growing demand? What's my part? What's your part, Cory? And being a partner in the success of dairy as a whole through the supply chain. Is that an accurate statement? Do you see yourself like that?
That's the way I see myself these days. And if I don't know an answer, I know someone who does or can help develop or create the answer.
And that's what's so cool about seeing you receive this recognition, Cory, as Industry Person of the Year is you're probably a little young to say it's a Lifetime Achievement Award, but truly this is your lifetime. This is your lifetime of connecting these dots and setting yourself up to do things that as a little kid in Manitowoc County, you didn't even dream of. And so neat to just watch that all come to fruition for you.
Thank you, Peggy. And I might run a little harder or hotter than other people. I don't share this very much, but my grandpa Geiger died at age 46. My dad had his first open heart surgery at 53. And one thing I knew as a kid, I'm like, get busy living. And ironically, I'm winning this award the same year my dad had his first open heart surgery. And that's not been lost on me. I want to live life to the fullest. And maybe that's one of the reasons I've accomplished what I have at this point in my life already.
You are living it, Cory, living it to the fullest. We've touched on a few of the ways that you have done that, continuing to do that. There's one in particular that we have to talk about in this conversation today. There's one of those impacts that is so specific to the heart and soul of World Dairy Expo, and that's your contribution and your leadership with a book that commemorated the greatest show on earth and its history. And we know it as World Dairy Expo's 50th anniversary book, We Need a Show. You were instrumental and pulling that together, coming up with the title for that, and putting all of those pieces in place to create and capture the history. Talk about this, Cory. How did you ever get involved in becoming not just an editor at that time, but a book author?
This is one of those moments in life that other people saw something in me and brought forth an idea. I remember the day, it was June of 2012, and then General Manager Mark Clark and Head of Communications Janet Keller called me and said, I'd like to have a meeting with you, and Mark would too. And I said, well, great. We weren't doing video conferences back then. And I'm like, well, let's just have it on the phone. No, we need to drive to Fort Atkinson. We want to take you out for lunch. And I'm like, well, what's the agenda topics? And they gave me some items, and I'm like, well, that doesn't warrant driving to Fort. We had a lunch in the Black Hawk Hotel, and after a little bit, they laid out a vision for a 50th anniversary book. And they're just talking through it. And I'm sitting there like, oh, I wonder why they're sharing this with me. And then at some point they said, we would like you to be the editor of it. And I gulped, just about choked on the water I was drinking. And we talked through a little bit more. And I said, well, this is a ginormous undertaking. I said, I need a co-editor. Can I talk to my supervisor, Steve Larson, who was then then I was managing editor already at Hoard's, but he had just retired from that. And he said, sure, whoever you want to involve. So I talked to Steve. He certainly agreed to do that. But then it was this. So it's 4 years before the 50th. And we were literally pegged to be the keynote kickoff. They wanted that book to release at the 49th and start this celebration. And I'm like, oh my word, this is a lot of oral histories. There was not much written down in 1966 when Alan Hetz is running around trying to get this momentum to build a show. So what we came up with is we had 2 meetings at World Dairy Expo offices. And people that know me, I keep journals and I keep them by year. They're on my shelf. I went back and looked, and we had the likes of Terry Howard, Bob Walton, Ray Keel, Roger Ripley, Jim Crowley Jr., Joe Gilbert, who started the trade show essentially, in the room. And there were a couple others. And we just tossed topics out and let them talk. And we recorded it. We took a lunch break. We did this all day. And at one point, somebody said, well, Alan, and it was Ray Keel, Alan Hetz was walking around to different people and just saying, we need a show. And what was the National Dairy Cattle Congress in Waterloo was in its slowdown. And I wrote that on the top of my journal, and I'm like, in my mind, beat that title. So we came back a month later. I transcribed all these notes. Wow. And I made what was 7 book chapters. And we sat there in Excel spreadsheets, projecting them on, and we just shuffled the topics down. And that became our walking direction for the book. And then I said, we have a title here. And I wrote it on the eraser board. We need a show. Do you have a better title? And they threw around all kinds of titles because everybody's trying to beat it. And it stuck. But that was that ultimate journey. And we hit our first deadline, and we were selling books at 49th Expo.
What a story, and what a piece of history to be involved in, the coffee table book that circulates around those who love World Dairy Expo. When we have a book on our table, seldom do we think about the person or the people who poured their heart and soul into making that and capturing all that content that fills the pages. And Cory, that was you and a team as well, I'm sure. But it takes a passion and a heart and a drive to want to capture and tell those stories.
Well, and I was co-editor, which meant we had outside writers, but we gave them direction. We gave them the cell phone numbers. This is who you talk to. And the other thing about that book, everybody that wrote for it, including Steve and I, it was a labor of love. We donated it back to World Dairy Expo for its development. And we did that in honor of those 4 people who were really those original ringleaders: Alan Hetz, Gene Nelson, Howard Vagley, Norm Magnuson Sr., and certainly Doc Jim Crowley Sr., who really brought a lot of UW Extension and dairy science people that breathe life into this show.
So after having heard all those stories and having personal conversations with some of those expo icons, if you had to pick just one that you could today meet for lunch and spend an hour with, who would be the one that you would pick?
That's easy for me. Alan Hetz. because in all the stories I heard, whenever this thing hit the ditch, it was him who brought it back. It was him who put it on track. I had the chance to talk to Roy, talk to his mother in their recollections at their kitchen table, and certainly Rodney as well. But Rodney was quite a bit younger at that moment in time. But somebody used the word dogged determination to what Alan was doing, and he wasn't going to let it fail. The first couple of years were a bit rough. Lost a lot of money, brought in some big name acts, and then they got to this reinvented core of a cattle show at a trade show and putting these activities around it. And that became modern day World Dairy Expo.
Isn't that something? And for you, what does it mean to you to have been a piece of collecting all of that and gathering the stories and putting it into a bound book? We need a show.
It was a moment of life joy. I think we only had one error in that book, which also meant we poured a lot of attention in the accuracy, the photo selection. And I think it's a legacy that brought together. Now we finally had the history chronicled. Some people laughed and jokingly said, well, you'll be around for the 75th to write the next edition. And I said, let's wait and see about that. But it was a big lift.
That's the game plan, right, Cory? You are going to be tasked with the 75th. Putting it on you right now. It'd be a lot harder to collect the 75-year history if the first 50 years weren't already done. I think it's one of those things that just stands out of the contributions that you've made. I think the other thing I want to draw out here too, Cory, these aren't things that you do because they're your job. It's something more that drives you, isn't it?
For 25 years, I've been secretary treasurer of Klusendorf. Every one of those winners and the Mackenzie Awards, I write the script the night before because we vote on them literally the day before. They're all in the quiet, which means the winner doesn't know. We somehow conjure up a story with someone close to get them in the ring. Same thing with the Merle Howard. I think we've been naming him the top junior exhibitor for 21 years. And the day or two before, the committee gives me the name and I write those scripts. But the smile on the face to have gone through and researched that person's history and get it accurately portrayed for reading on the Coliseum floor, to see other people's reaction when someone recognizes them for the good they've done, that feeds my soul.
It takes a special person to do that. And now you get to be on the other side of it this year. You get to be the recipient and the one that others are writing about instead of being the author yourself. We talk about you being an author, this extension of Cory the editor, Cory the economist. Now you're Cory the author, and it didn't end at we need a show. It actually started something there for you, didn't it?
It did. I began to travel the country and the world. And there's the old adage that the cow thinks the grass is greener on the other side of the fence. By the time I hit my 30s, I was like, I had a pretty green pasture at my home farm, even though I didn't travel a lot. And I spent a lot of time with my grandparents and chronicled our family farm's history that dated back to 1867. I was sixth generation on the farm. And I couldn't convince my parents to have a 150th party in 2017. So what I did is started a party in the paper. I talked to the editors of the Brilliant News, and I started out with 20 columns about our farm, but I used a process called creative nonfiction because I'm like, well, other people don't want to read about our farm. But I brought in what this meant to immigrants, what it meant to what was happening in the U.S. and the world. And these stories turned into 99 of them. Along the way, people like, you need to write a book. And I'm like, if I wouldn't have been for reading this show, I would have probably blown that idea off. Well, as I started writing books, and then my wife, who read every manuscript, Krista, and loves to edit and is good at it too, said, you got to move beyond self-publishing here. And she took 7 books out of the library. We wrote a proposal for publication, simultaneously submitted to 7 different publishers, and we got a contract within 6 weeks, which is almost unheard of. I had to hire lawyers because there was no way I was going to sign that first contract. So those books launched in 2021 and 2023 and have won 4 national writing awards now. I've almost sold 10,000 copies. The best part about the book writing is when people come up to me and said, this caused me to remember a story about my family farm. And they'll tell me that story. Or they'll get a conversation going within their family, and it stirs up education and conversations between the generations. And that tells me I hit a bullseye.
Those are the moments when you know that you're in the right place doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing, aren't they, Cory? What I think is really interesting and inspiring about what you do and what you have done as well, Cory, is that there's a strong appreciation for history and what built the industry that we have today, the people and the events and occurrences, but also you have this ability to also look forward based on what history has shown and the data. And as an economist, with that role being your focus today, it's such a cool way to blend together the appreciation for the past and the forward looking for the future. Do you see that too? Is that what comes together full circle in your day to day?
Listening to you, Peggy, I wrote 3 things down. I'm definitely a student of history. I'm a student of dairy, and I look to the future and try to weave in what that all means. That would be a theme of my life.
I can so see that for you, Cory. And it also brings us to thinking about that greater picture. That's legacy. And that's the way that people will remember you, think of you, and also the impacts that you've made, whether they are from stages, they're from national awards, but they're also from one little nylon halter that makes a kid smile at the Junior Holstein Convention. And it just is in so many different ways that you are intentionally making those impacts within the dairy industry. But what is it that 20 or 30 years from now that you hope people remember most about you? Is it the book? Is it the articles? Is it the economic insights? What is it, Cory?
One thing is, not everybody agrees with me, but I hope I've caused people to think. And then there's the fact, how did you make people feel? How do they feel when they interacted with you? And if you do that and keep those things cognizant, you can move things forward. There are a number of people in our industry, when I see a job opening, I'll be like, you need to apply for it. Or I'll call the people up that posted it and say, you should consider this person. And I should have wrote them all down over time. There's still people that come up to me, but can you help mentor somebody? Can you help bring a positive synergy together to move somebody forward? The other thing I'd like to tell young people, remember to grow where you are planted and become the best you can be at the time, because you have no idea where the seeds and winds of life will take you. And I think the seeds and winds of life have taken me pretty far because I bloomed where I was at the moment in time.
And is that how you want to be remembered, as someone who was a mentor above all else?
I think so.
That exemplifies the meaning of impact on industry, but that occurs one by impact on the individual. That's the picture of Industry Person of the Year, Cory, World Dairy Expo Industry Person of the Year. So we have touched on a lot of pieces of your personal story that started out as a farm kid in Manitowoc County and has taken you around the world as an editor, an economist, an author. Is there anything that we missed? Anything that you want to make sure we add in this conversation today?
I think we covered it well, Peggy.
It's an honor to get to have this conversation with you, Cory. Again, as someone who I've gotten to watch from being a young kid and looking up to the way that you were giving back and being a leader in the Wisconsin dairy community, but now with a global impact, and one that appreciates the past and is optimistic for the future and has the incredible ability to tie it all together. 2026 Industry Person of the Year. Congratulations, Cory Geiger, and thank you. Thank you for listening to this special Recognition Award Winner series presented in partnership with World Dairy Expo's The Dairy Show podcast and the Uplevel Dairy podcast. I'm Peggy Coffeen, and if you are interested in joining and celebrating this year's honorees at World Dairy Expo's Recognition Award Banquet on Tuesday evening, September 29th in Madison, Wisconsin, make sure to visit worlddairyexpo.com and get all of your show details there as well. And for more conversations with dairy's innovators, leaders, and change makers, make sure to follow Uplevel Dairy Podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you for listening to the Uplevel Dairy Podcast. If you enjoyed today's conversation, make sure to follow the show, share this episode with your friends in the dairy community, and leave a review. At Uplevel Dairy, we're here to highlight the leaders, the lessons, and the real-world experiences that are shaping the future of our dairy industry. Find more by following us on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram for behind-the-scenes content and upcoming guests. And subscribe at upleveldairy.com to get new episodes and our Dairy Insights blogs right in your inbox. I'm Peggy Coffeen, and until next time, keep on learning, keep on leading, and keep up-leveling your dairy.